Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Making Time for Black Mental Health. Thanks everybody for joining me. We have got a packed event for you this evening. So you may well have received the program. Just some housekeepings. Can you ensure that your phones are on vibrate or switched off? Thank you very much. Can I also ensure that we are happy for you to have your camera on or your camera off, whichever you decide, or your video on or video off. So the program is, we are going to kickstart with our panel question. Why do you think most Black people don't share their mental illness? And then we will continue with the Q&A panel. Okay, so if you are a panelist, please get your mic ready and your video ready, because we will kick off with the panelists. So guys, if you don't know, I'm the founder of Making Time for Black Mental Health. I'm so excited for this event. If you have any queries, please use the chat button. But before we start, I need you please to just confirm your location. If you can, in the chat, either say what borough you're from or the first part of your postcode. What borough you're from or the first part of your postcode, please. In the chat, thank you. Serena will be assisting me this evening. So if you need to DM or send a private message, please send that to Serena. She will be assisting this evening. So in the chat, we would love for you to say your location by your London borough or by the country or the first parts of your postcode. That would be wonderful. This event is in partnership with Rethink Charity, Bipolar UK, BBS, Brent Bereavement Charity, and the Samaritans. Throughout the evening, you will be directed to a link, and at the ending of the event, we do welcome your feedback, because your feedback is what makes this event spectacular and for so many people that join. Right now, if I'm doing my maths, 4 times 4 is 16, times 3 is how much? So we've got about over 60 people here. Okay, so panelists, are you ready? We have Rethink on the panelists, we have BBS on the panelists, and we have our own WhatsApp members. I am going to leave you in the hands of my event manager, Serena, who will kick off the panelist event section, which will end around 7 o'clock for the Q&A Black Mental Health panel. Over to you, Serena.
Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. As Bella said, I'm Serena. If we have any panelists in the room, it'd be really good if you could just raise your hand, because not everybody has come on with their company name. I've got you. You should get asked to unmute if you're, I've got, yeah. Okay. So I'm going to send a poll, first things first. So I'm going to send a poll, and if everybody can just answer the first poll that I've just sent round, that would be good. Great. I think most people have answered. So, our first question. Why do you think most people don't share their mental health issues or mental illness? So we'll start with Mark.
All right then. So from experience, for everyone who doesn't know, I'm a counsellor and psychotherapist. So from my experience of working with people from our community, the reason as to why they don't share their mental health or mental health issues is due to fear of embarrassment, fear of being judged, fear of shame. This is also a new territory for us, as in like being able to put words to these emotions, you know, like being able to identify what anxiety is, what depression is, what mental illness is, like bipolar, schizophrenia, things of that nature, you know. What else is there? And I think that's a lot to do with our culture and our history. Like we've always been having to keep things moving to survive. You know, we haven't had a chance to slow down and be able to actually explore how we've been feeling feelings. Like unless it's stopping me from going to work tomorrow, then I'm okay. I should be able to keep going. However, through data that's like shared through Samaritans and mental health organizations, we can see that depression, anxiety, and mental illnesses are a serious concern for people of our community.
Thank you. And can I ask Nina, same question?
Hi. I definitely would say, coming from an African, well, I was born in Central Africa, but I grew up in the UK, and my dad had a kind of tropical food business. So I've been very much connected to the community, as in African West Indian community. And from what I've observed, it's definitely, you would be ashamed if you, well, you would feel like you needed to be ashamed to kind of come out and say that you're struggling mentally. And something like witchcraft is something that you hear about quite often in films, you know, how it's depicted. Again, it's something you wouldn't be open about because it's seen as like a taboo. So I think when you add that to, like, sorry, I've forgotten, Mark mentioned the pressure of kind of hustling in London, you know, being just coming here for better pastures, you know, wanting to better your life. There's just a pressure to constantly work and keep up with what you know, you've got to support family back home, you've got to support yourself. So economic pressures, yeah, it's a lot to carry, along with the history of, yeah, what we grow up with, kind of thing. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense. You're talking about culturally.
Yeah, culturally, yeah.
Yeah, what happens. And Prue?
So hi, my name is Prue, and I have suffered with anxiety for most of my life, starting from about the age of maybe 14. I remember in my mid-teens. And so I've had a lot of time to think about this. I'm also from an African background, spent most of my formative years in Southern Africa. And the way I've come to summarize it over time from the perspective of a Black African woman is, for one reason or another, whether it's perception or the real world that we live in, we feel or believe that we don't have the same rights as everyone else, and I'll explain that. Things as simple as the right to me time, which is something very important for good mental health, okay, is something that for a lot of Black African women is a luxury. You don't get to have me time. You've got children, you've got an extended family, and you've got a job. Things like, well, even the right to be ill. Mark touched on it. Again, you know, you don't get to be ill, you know, and if you're coming from a culture where, you know, you don't have benefits and you don't have this, that, and the other, it's just not a right that you're entitled to, okay? You don't have the right to complain, okay? For one reason or another, you don't have the right to complain, okay? And it could be because you're not the main breadwinner in the house, and therefore you take whatever is given to you, and therefore it's you know, a self-fulfilling cycle. It could be you don't have the right to complain because of your belief or misplaced belief in what Christianity means. You know, as a Christian who God is looking after, you shouldn't be complaining, okay? Or you don't have the right to complain because someone you know in Africa, whether personally or whatever, has a harder life than you, okay? So that very fact that perceived or otherwise, we don't have all of these rights means that things that should just be sometimes blips in health, because at the end of the day, it's just, as someone said before, we all have mental health, and just like our physical health, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But when it is bad, we just don't have the right to acknowledge it, and therefore it gets worse.
Absolutely, thank you for sharing, Prue. We did get a comment in the chat from Cassandra, I think it was. So Cassandra says, we carry a great deal of shame as Black people, stigma, shame, embarrassment. Don't tell people at your place of work, business, keep it moving, don't wash your dirty linen in public. Yeah. And on our last event, we had a long conversation about the stigma around mental health. And like Nina was saying earlier about the cultural issues in yourself, Prue, you know, that's what comes to mind when you think about sharing things around mental health. There was another comment, sorry, just trying to navigate the chat, lots of people talking. Andrea Burrows, she said, I think that Black clients should be entitled to have a practitioner that looks like them. However, not all Black clients want to see a Black therapist for their own reasons and have to accept that, as long as the client has a good relationship with their therapist and can feel okay in a safe space. Another comment from Philip, as has already been mentioned, it may be taboo issue of pride, fear of being labelled as mad. That could be a factor. Okay. Were there any other questions? I know, Andrea, I can't see you on my screen to unmute you. If you just raise your hand, I'll be able to unmute you. Are you there, Andrea?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I totally agree with Cassandra. I think it's that whole sort of old school upbringing of you keep your business to yourself. You don't want to make it seem like you need support or need help from outside. And it's ingrained in us, I think. And it's true, you feel like you can't even be sick, like we've seen our mothers as we grow up. I don't even remember a time that my mum was really sick or was in bed, because you're just told to get on with it, aren't you? Because there's people much worse off than you. But I think the rhetoric has to change moving forward, because mental health is really key in the job I do. So I work in the NHS, I'm a clinician and I'm an operational manager now. And I can just see, even from the pandemic and things like that, how many mental health patients we have come through the door every day. So I do really think the rhetoric needs to change, and I think this platform is really important to have these discussions, and it will help a lot of people.
Thank you, Andrea. I think it's Akua in the chat said that there's a lack of knowledge around mental health issues. Who else feels that that is an issue here? I know, Mark, you had something else you wanted to say.
Yeah, I suppose just on that, like knowledge and that on mental health, I feel like because I suppose we're so ingrained in our day-to-day, at times it's just like, you know, when something physically takes hold of you, you know, you can go to your GP and hopefully they'll listen to you, they'll try and diagnose you and say, oh, you need this medication for this cold or whatever it is. And we can do the same for our mental health. You know, they will listen to you and they'll try and see if they can prescribe you something. But outside of your general practitioner or the National Health Service, I've noticed that some people do not know where to go to be able to identify what mental health is or what mental illness is. You know, and on top of that, it's not knowing where to go, I suppose, to find out the impact of what someone's anxiety will do to them, or the impact of what depression is, and things of that nature. So for me as a therapist, I would use psychological questionnaires and tools to be able to gauge how serious it is, how severe the anxiety is, or how severe the depression is. But I suppose as Black people, we rely very heavily on our pastors, our priests, our imams, our babalawes, I can never say that word, as well as like coping habits like music, substance use, and things of that nature. So the information is there, but I suppose it needs to be promoted. There's certain channels that we can access, but we just may not know of it as well. We need to improve on that.
Yeah, definitely. And Delmina?
Greetings, everyone. I'm in agreement with what most people are saying, but one of the reasons I think that people don't access therapists, whether Black or not, is that they don't realize that they've got a mental health issue. Growing up and living as I would say, an African Caribbean person in Britain, in the Tulsa Brixton area, we had to navigate a lot of things in terms of police brutality, racism. There was a lot of stuff going on, continual fights, you know, and having the conversation with our parents, how to conduct ourselves on the roads, how to dress, how to look. That's a lot of things from a young age that we're navigating. And we don't realize that all of these things are being compounded day by day by day. Just from a very young age, you're told to walk a certain way, look a certain way, don't walk that way, don't stand too long here, don't congregate because it's a gang if you're together, you know, watch how you speak to people, everything, even from there, right the way through our careers in the workplace, even if you're in a senior position, it's just compounded one thing after the other, And then after a while, you know, you don't realize that you are always anxious. You're always worried about how you sound, how you look. You know, do people, you know, respect you as a professional? It's a daily thing that we have to navigate. And I think that when we come to the knowledge, you know, sometimes we have to admit that sometimes there are things that are going on that we can't compartmentalize. Sometimes there is a time when we have to be in a space where we have to outpour. Just like Mark say, we speak to our pastors, we speak to our families, but sometimes there are certain things that you need to speak about away from your family, some things that you want to expose that you don't want to expose to your family members, but the shame of embarrassment of, you know, family business is family business. You know, you keep it to yourself. You don't expose yourself to the wider community because it's looked as a form of weakness. I think that from now, looking at therapy is a position of strength, is a position of self-care, is a position of moving forward and deciding what your life is going to look like and taking charge and ownership of what your life is going to look like. So mental health or mental illness is a serious thing that we really need to address and in the wider community, and how we can support in terms of therapy. Thank you all.
Absolutely, thank you very much. And the other thing is, like, you know, how removing that kind of stigma when we think about our bodies, physical, we feed ourselves, we make sure we have a good intake of liquid, we exercise, you know, we do all these things to take care of our physical well-being, but our mind is part of that. And so, you know, separating mental health from your physical health, sometimes people see it as a completely different thing. If you're not caring for your mind the same way you care for your body, then obviously things can go wrong. And it's really important that we look out for signs and support people that we know are experiencing any mental health issues or signs of stress, so that they can be supported through that. Cassandra made another comment, and that was around the fact that Black people are more likely to be compulsory detained under the Mental Health Act, so less likely to be referred to talking therapies and things like that. So, you know, we're here talking about therapy and how important it is that people have access to it. But sometimes that maybe that whole step is missed with Black people. How do you feel about that? Prue?
Yeah, so I agree completely with that point. And again, I think one of the ways I've summarized that over the years is we have a lack of people who we can trust. And that trust isn't necessarily trust in the wider sense, because there are people who we trust with other things, but we can't trust with telling about our mental health. Okay, and sometimes that's some of the people closest to us. So yeah, so we have a shortage of people who we feel we can trust to have these conversations with for a number of reasons. And that takes me back to the very first question on the call. Do I think that I should be entitled to ask for a Black therapist? Well, absolutely, because already a lot of my experiences give me a larger distrust to people who don't look like me.
Absolutely. There's a comment from Kwame. It says there's a lack of knowledge around different expressions of stress and mental ill health. And there's also a lot of shame around being weak, etc. However, we also have to be careful not to pathologize our community in relation to others. Conversations around mental health, ill health is uncomfortable across different communities. I'm going to go to, is it Dante?
So I can't lie, African girls are so thick, you know. African girls are so thick. They're fat bundas, you know.
Okay, we'll remove you. Akua, sorry about that, guys.
I'm trying to, okay, brilliant. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah, I'm in Ghana at the moment. I've been in the UK for a number of years. I was working for over 11 years with young people in a therapeutic way, from in South West London. And I studied in Switch Cottage, my psychotherapy training. So I have experience of studying in the field and offering therapeutic interventions across the board. And now I'm in Ghana, Africa. I came here to actually work with people in a therapeutic way as well, but that hasn't been able to happen because, again, it's the lack of knowledge. And I think that some of the things that happen in Africa mirror some of the things that happen in the West. So my experience in terms of the first question about requiring a Black therapist for yourself or for our clients to have the knowledge and the choice about choosing. Basically, when we talk to anybody, just no everyday conversation, we want to be understood. And one thing that I found when I was training in a predominantly white institution was that even I, as an individual, was not understood in that institution. And that institution was training therapists to work with people from different backgrounds. And if I, as the trainee, wasn't understood, it really concerns me about how my clients would feel working with somebody that was not be able to understand them and their struggles and their journey. It's not across the board. My own therapist, I've kept my therapist since I've been here in Ghana, and she's actually been to, she's white, I would say white middle class, but she's actually been to Ghana. So she has a little feel of certain things that I will speak to her about. So it's not across the board. I mean, I generally encourage my clients to make sure that you're comfortable with whoever you are working with, your therapist, and you can choose to change. And then the other thing is about today, it was quite interesting. I went to, I had a stomachache, so I went to get a painkiller. And in the pharmacy, whilst here, I saw the medication risperidone. So that created a conversation about who they would actually give that medication to. And so I'm actually in the process of trying to find an opening to what kind of work and what I can offer in terms of information to people here in Africa. And we're doing some work in the summer across the board. Like I'm working with an institution in the UK that's working alongside people in Africa. So I think this conversation and this platform, for me, I don't look excited because I'm not well, but I'm more than excited. And I really thank you for your efforts for putting it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Akira. We'll go back to Mark. And then I'll read some comments from the chat.
Yeah, I suppose I just wanted to echo, I think, what I've said in the comments, and it really was that, I think it's off the back of what someone said earlier about we face quite a lot of challenges socially, you know, like we face police brutality. So in institutions that are there to kind of protect us are there discriminating against us. So like, again, when you go to like the National Health Service, there's discrimination ingrained in there, institutional racism. So it kind of, I suppose it was to contribute that people of colour won't necessarily want to go to an institution for support that they know discriminates against them, you know? And I suppose off the back of what the previous lady was saying about providing therapy to someone who looks different to her, I suppose is quite the norm for us Black people. We always assume that we're going to be supported by someone who's white, you know? But then in that, sometimes they miss some of our cultural differences. Like they may not see, you know how we're read sometimes misinterpreted. Like we might see our passion can sometimes come across as anger or just misconstrued, you know? And the reason why a therapist of colour is necessary is because we'll be able to identify with that. We don't necessarily have to say, oh yeah, I know what you're going through and be dismissive. And we can still keep it about the client or the person accessing support, but we would just be able to read them that bit better. And I think that's what's missing from a lot of health providers that are mainstream, you know. So I just wanted to contribute on that bit.
Thank you. And I'm just going to quickly go to Angela.
Thank you. Serena, I'm not sure who actually organised this event, but I just came across it by accident, but I don't think anything happens by accident. By divinely kind of came to me, because I work as a therapist, and I've worked right across the board, from kind of primary, secondary, further education, higher education, and even in private practice. And everything that everyone's kind of saying here is perfectly on point. Like the lady who came, is it Akua?
Mm-hmm.
Is she still there behind the scene?
Yes, she's there.
She said that she's now working in Ghana, and the fact that I had a white male therapist, and I have to say that wasn't my intention, but I just felt I was led to kind of work with him. But over the 4 years that I was in therapy whilst I was doing my own training, he saw me and met me as much as he could, and understood my background and everything about me, and I accepted, and I actually grew from that. And I think what we are needing to also understand is that, because I went through my own therapy, having been born here, parents had their own issues when they came, and I have to say quite damaged emotionally, but that's not their fault. It's their issues that they came from when they came from Jamaica. But the knock-on effect of that, of myself going through therapy, is recognizing that I then had the skills to support my children to deal with their own mental health, so that my intention was to make sure that they got more emotional support than I did. And it's remembering that when people do choose to go into therapy, that it's not just about the individual, it's about the knock-on effect and the generation, kind of clearing and making sense of that generation